Hi, my name is Anayeli Barragan, and I will be presenting an article on school-based drug prevention programs, a review of what works. It is by David W. Sewell, Lorraine Mazarol, and Sasha Rumbout. And the research problem for this article is illicit substance use among school-age children is a major growing concern. And the article states that in the U.S., about 36.8% of 8th through 12th graders reported having used an illicit substance during their lifetime. This research article focuses on two systematic reviews that have examined the impact of school-based drug prevention programs on illicit drug outcomes. So, the research goals for this study primarily they want to examine the effectiveness of school-based drug prevention programs in preventing illicit drug use. So what they did was they took two past systemic reviews by accessing studies conducted after the late 1990s to assess the effectiveness of school-based drug prevention programs in reducing or preventing substance use. What they also wanted to do with this was compare and contrast the results from the reviews of illicit drug use outcomes. The article does ask, well, the authors in the article do focus on three research questions, and those are: do school-based drug prevention programs reduce rates of illicit drug use? What features are characteristics of effective programs? Do these effective programs characteristics differ from those identified as effective in reviews of school-based drug prevention of illicit substance, illicit substance such as alcohol and tobacco. So what they consider illicit is alcohol, tobacco, and illicit would be any of the hardcore drugs such as marijuana, well, not even marijuana, but heroin, methamphetamines, things like that. Research hypothesis. So for this article, there was no exact hypothesis. They focused a lot on exploring the characteristics, wavering whether interactivity made a significant impact, the same for a level of intensity, who should deliver this type of programming, the group size effects, the developmental stage this programming should be employed, and just really harping on whether any of these weighs in significantly. So the methods, design, and procedures of this article, like I said earlier, they were focused on updating the findings from past reviews of school-based drug prevention programs pertaining to illicit drug use outcomes. And the school-based component varied from curriculum-based education to policy structural change and also behavioral changes through self-reported use. They used restricted journals published. They refrained from using journals published before 1990 due to time and resource constraints. But what they did with this was, from what the number of studies that they gathered, they did narrative reviews and meta-analysis where they pulled all the data from, and they were able to see pre-test and post-test for to compare and control the control and non-control groups. So there were two individuals who were trained by the third author to look for these studies, and out of all of the studies that there were out there, 149 of these studies were identified to have drug use outcome measures. Out of all of those 149, only 58 studies were included in the narrative review process because they met the study design criteria. And they were assessed on a 6-point scale to measure methodological flaws. Then from there, they began the meta-analytic process. Of the 58 studies included in the review, only 12 studies provided enough data to examine 16 treatment comparing contrast to enable calculation of an effect size. The other 46 remaining studies were excluded because they did not present enough raw data to calculate effect sizes, and 2 other studies did not present data on the variances of the groups. So what they considered as variances included date of implementation, intervention type, multifaceted booster sessions, type of provider, level of interaction and intensity, level of sessions, peer involvement, provider training, sample characteristics that consisted of like the student grade level, gender, race, and ethnicity. The design characteristics, methodological rigor scores were used, and then the implementation of fidelity, whether it was high, medium, or low, or unclear. And what implementation fidelity represents is how likely were the schools to use the curriculum-based interventions in their site. So that's what that rates. Comparison groups status, whether there was any treatment, standard care, lower level of treatment, mixed or unclear, all of that needed to be recorded. The meta-analysis were conducted using a random effects model because it is a more conservative estimate of variance and reduces the likelihood of overestimation on the effect of an intervention. So from there on, the moderator analysis were conducted to assess the impact of categorical variables on obtained size distributions from the studies being reviewed. After all of that, a total of 6 meta-analyses were conducted, of which 4 are reported in the article. And they're reported in detail. So, and that's where most of the results come from. So there were several significant findings with 4 out of the 6 meta-analyses that were conducted and produced significant mean effect sizes. All analysis produced mean effect sizes in the desired direction, indicating that overall there are program effectiveness in both the marijuana and all drug analysis. Results suggested that school-based drug prevention programs not only have an immediate impact on self-reported drug use, but that this impact persists in the long term. Based on the review of the evaluations also, the study suggested that effective education focusing on interpersonal development through self-reflection are unlikely to reduce self-reported illicit drug use. So what this means is that like knowledge-based programs, including passive information dissemination, are not very effective. There was mixed results for social influence programs and skills training. Their programs, we've all heard of they had no significant impact. Gender-wise, females seem to benefit more from the program. And on a system-wide level change, they did emphasize that multi-component programs involving inclusion of family, community, or media were most likely to be very strong or have a stronger approach, along with the involvement of on the policy level, basically encouraging for a push in those 2 areas so that there could be a bigger impact on how it's delivered or how it is carried out on a school-based system. Some consistencies between prior research reporting on illicit drug use outcomes and review that focuses on illicit drug use outcomes included the improved effectiveness that was observed for programs that implemented a collaborative approach, interactive methods consisting of social influence and competency enhancement increased program effectiveness for both licit and illicit drugs. Higher amount of sessions positively impacted illicit and licit drug use, meaning that there was a decrease in the reported drug use. Adoption of universal approach improved effectiveness as well. And then some limitations. So, base rates of illicit drugs use are low since programs were implemented at the beginning of middle school when drug experimentation is low. So this isn't necessarily bad. However, because a lot of kids or young adolescents are beginning to experiment, the likelihood of them reporting that they're doing it is not that high. Therefore, such programs target high school students more, or towards the end of like their middle school years, because that's where we started to see a progression in their use. Not being able to assess self-reported illicit drug use, since most of the studies relayed information that included perceptions and attitudes, and this was primarily due to failure to ask questions about actual use of illicit substances, mainly because these were conditions imposed by ethics committees on asking questions about illegal behavior of children under the age of 18. So, with that being said, also, it doesn't really address whether who would be the best suited provider to deliver such programming. And this refers mostly to whether teachers should be delivering this or a counselor. The article does say that counselors should be the ones, that there's more effectiveness if they were to do it. However, there needs to be proper training done in this area. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you.